Welcome to the Logosphere. I'm Chris Stites, here as always with J.D.
Hello, good evening.
And this evening we are going to talk about one of our favorite subjects as of late, which is the late, great Friedrich Nietzsche and the dangerous effects he can have. I'm someone who was a little bit late to the party, of course familiar with him over time, but it's only recently that I really did a deep dive and tried to absorb some of the stuff he was going on about and read deeply over a period of a few weeks Beyond Good and Evil.
Yeah, and I studied him when I was getting my degree in philosophy. In my experience, I had many years sober, and I read Nietzsche for the first time, and I think it was Beyond Good and Evil, and Genealogy and Morals and the Gay Science, and thus spoke Zarathustra, and the reason why we're bringing this up is because we want to analyze, is he dangerous to moral philosophy, right? He's obviously is. He's a people call him an amoralist. He's against morals, basically. He thinks that the morals that bring society and are the pillars of society, like Judeo-Christian morals, are completely perverse and almost evil in a weird way, and it serves the meek, and he turns everything upside down on its head. It really does. It's really it can be devastating if you get even a little bit of what he's trying to say.
And I think part of the reason it's been so devastating for us is because of our lives as sober men, which is become founded on a lot of these moral principles.
Right. Like humility is one example.
Humility is everything, man. If you're in recovery, if you're trying to be sober, the name of the game is practicing and perfecting the art of humility.
Yeah, dripping with humility.
Yes.
It's an expression.
It's an expression.
Yeah, it gets thrown around. And everything starts from this axiom of humility.
Yeah.
And I mean, my understanding of Nietzsche is that humility would serve the meek, right? He would say that's meekness. That's the herd mentality.
It's a way to just blend into the herd.
Right.
Yeah.
And not
safe.
Embrace these powerful, more animalistic drives that we have, these more like creature, just take over power. I mean, a lot of people, with what's happening in the culture today, with gender ideology and stuff, a lot of people say, power dynamics, right? The whole postmodern critique on society and Judeo-Christian values. He basically, he's used as an engine. I mean, the Nazis used him too. That's an interesting history about him, but his sister kind of hijacked his last works because he died from, I think it was like some kind of stomach illness, right? The dysentery
I think he was very ill.
He was very
for a long time.
Yeah.
I've heard that syphilis is possibly
maybe
something
syphilis, yeah. I've heard that
has been attributed to his downfall, but he spent a long time like in solitude in the mountains.
Yep.
Trying to, sort of benefit from the clean air and the altitude and try to get better. He died, I don't know, his 50s or something like that.
Yeah, he died pretty young.
Yeah.
And he mostly studied, from what I learned in college about him, is he studied the Greeks a lot. He had a bone to pick with Plato and Aristotle and all of them. Socrates. He respected him. So the interesting thing I think about Nietzsche, why maybe a part of me thinks that he's not some evil demon trying to, spout out bad things for humanity, is that he had a great respect for the ancients and the Greeks, and most of the people that he rails the most against, like Immanuel Kant, these really technical philosophers that are very difficult to understand.
He just dunks on them left and right.
Yeah, he dunks on them left and right, but that usually is a sign that he loves them too.
They get a lot of mentions.
Yeah. And Kant was kind of, he was considered almost like a Jesus smuggler, and he didn't travel much either.
At all. I think.
Yeah, no,
he's known for staying in his hometown his whole life.
Right. And so he got a lot of flack for that, because Nietzsche was all about, he would study the Persians and the Greeks and the Egyptians, and he was like trying to he really railed against Buddhism like that. He called Buddhism like nihilism to its full end, and it's when you read him, it's like Sam Harris's critique of him as a 14-year-old immature school kid or something.
Which I get that reading, and going through it, I had to keep asking myself, is Nietzsche just like the prototypical sad boy? Is he just like...
Well, do you think?
No, but it's, he's a tough one, notably he's self-contradictory in a way that one of the beauties of Nietzsche, I think, is that he doesn't care about being self-contradictory.
Yeah.
He would make an argument against someone like Kant, that Kant is so careful and every argument is preceded by, something, and everything kind of lends itself to the next argument. Everything is very systematic and logical.
Almost mathematical. Yeah.
Nietzsche would almost say that he's playing by rules of language, and that Nietzsche would prefer to philosophize with a hammer. So he would...
That's true.
He will switch up styles. Right. Some of it will just be almost like stream of consciousness. Some of it will be more technical.
Yeah, and then some will be poetry. Yeah. And he wrote music too. I don't know if you knew that.
I didn't know that.
And it's not... I mean, it's like weird...
I know that he liked music.
Yeah,
he writes a lot about it.
Yeah, he loved art. He was
Wagner was his...
Yeah, he was a big critic of art. Yeah. And he's just he's an interesting character, because it's like when you try to wrestle with somebody like that, I mean, for example, right, like the opening introduction to the book, that's his writing, not, some other philosopher introducing him, but his first thing is he talks about, what if truth was a woman? And basically he's dunking on truth, this idea of truth, right? That there's this truth out there in the world that we can find.
It's interesting that history has treated him like he's one of the earliest postmodernists in some respect.
Yeah, he's labeled postmodern, but I guess he wouldn't be. Or he's actually labeled an existentialist too, but he's kind of...
And a nihilist.
But you can amoralist.
You can just see how some of the ideas that he set forth became the groundworks for what became postmodernism.
Right.
But he would have dunked all over postmodernists too.
Yes.
But just this idea that there is no... All these philosophers before thought there was this thing that was the objective truth, capital T, and that they were out to seek it. And his criticism was that they were just out to promulgate their truth.
Right.
And it was really more about the philosopher than the philosophy.
Right.
He was also one of the early psychoanalysts. He wasn't explicitly, but he was a huge influence for Freud. I mean, in the sense that he really was skeptical of everyone's motivation.
Yes. And that's rooted in his idea of perspectivism. He kind of coined that, One of my favorite quotes from him is, "Fact is precisely what there is, not only interpretation." And that's almost that, you can see where the moral relativism comes from.
Yes.
That, right? Like, this is kind of getting technical, but you know what I mean? Like I think people bloomed off of that. They said, "Oh my God, here's this great hero philosopher, and he's turning all these traditional morals and values on their face. Wow, this is really, his internal recurrence theory is amazing. I'm going to go dive into that." And truth is relative. There's no capital T truth. It's just relative to where you are and what you're doing, right? There's no universals. He hated universals.
Yeah.
But he's
and the
universals.
Objectivism.
Yeah, objectivism. Exactly.
Yeah. But I think one way that he was different than the postmodernists, a postmodernist might say that there is no universal truth. There is just the narrative of the person who is in power,
right,
who seeks to promote their own power.
Right. It's power dynamics.
Yeah.
And that'd be like Foucault.
But what the postmodernist might say is that that's true for everyone except for the person who's professing that philosophy.
Right.
They're standing there pointing at the ones who are doing that.
Right.
And not also...
Yeah.
Not also doing it themselves.
Right.
But Nietzsche would kind of say, like, I'm the only person who's being true about what's happening here.
Yeah.
He was embracing of his subjectivism, or anyone's subjectivism.
Yeah. I never found a way how he got out of universals, though. Like how he would say there are no universals because that is a universal.
Mm-hmm.
And that's almost like, it's like circular in a way. But
Mm-hmm.
there's a long argument where he kind of slips his way out of it. And that was explained to me years ago, but I never digested. But I think where we want our conversation to go is, so let's just take one concept like humility,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, or something that we try to live our life by in the day we're in, right? God, because he's also known for the idea that God is dead. We invented him and we killed him. That's like Nietzsche right there. And that to the postmodernists and to a lot of people, they were like, oh, hallelujah. Like this guy's, he's got something going on here. And I don't know. Like, I don't know if he meant it in that way. I think he was just critiquing, right? He's just a really gnarly critique. He's cynical, in a lot of ways, but he blows it all up.
Mm-hmm.
That's the problem. That's the danger, I think.
It seems like one of his fundamental ideas with the God is dead thing, as best as I can understand it, is this idea that civilization has been sort of founded on these fundamental values.
Right.
But that stage can no longer hold us. Right?
Yeah.
And so where do we go from there?
Right.
Some people would say that we have to return. That's always a popular narrative.
The traditionalists. Yes, yeah. The conservative types. Yeah.
Which is I think that would be in line with a lot of recovery philosophies.
Probably.
Right?
Yeah.
It's there's this playbook for life. It was handed down from a mountain somewhere. I don't need to do things my way. I just need to do the things the right way that they've been done since time immemorial.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tricky because because he also analyzes pagans, right? So he goes from the pagans where the might is right, kind of like the blonde beast that's like the head of whatever village or whatever. He's going around chopping off heads, and it's like power is right, because power is going to write history. Power is going to get all the gold and everything in the booty, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't work anymore. Now we've switched with Jesus because he would call Jesus an Ubermensch, actually. He was a Superman, even though he critiqued all his morals and his virtues and stuff. But he would say Jesus entered in this kind of herd thing, right? This herd monotheistic kind of way of like repenting and forgiveness and what's that other quote that he says, like the bad thing about you lying to me is that I can never trust you again. But that rings true though, because when somebody does lie to you, do you ever really trust them again? Like if somebody really deceives you, right? Like Cain and Abel type of deceit, right? They literally kill you. Maybe they don't physically kill you, but they kill your character in a bad way, right? Like they cheat, they lie, they steal in a really bad way. And then they come and they make an amends, because that's a huge part of the recovery process is making this amends and repenting. Right. And going, you know what? I was wrong. And not I'm sorry, but I was wrong. This is where I was wrong. These are all the things I did that were wrong to you. Now, is there a way I can make it right? And we'll say, clean your side of the street, right? Like sweep your side of the street, right? And that's a huge, like, I don't know, when I went through that process, it was transformative. It's one of the most beautiful things.
What do you think Nietzsche would have to say about that?
I don't know. I always think like he would be like, well, might is right. Like, you got to just take over, basically. You got to command your emotions. You can't be weak. You can't be meek. You can't be a herd. Like if you made a mistake, like maybe admit to your mistake, but just move on,
What do recovery people think about the herd? What do they say about the herd?
They say stay in the middle of the herd.
Stay in the middle of the herd. And Nietzsche would say...
Yeah, he's so anti-morals.
He wouldn't even say stay out of the herd. He would basically say, it seems like one of his opinions is you're either a new philosopher or an Ubermensch, or you're not.
Or you're not,
This book is not this is not an instruction manual on how to become an Ubermensch.
Yeah.
If you're reading this, newsflash, you're not an Ubermensch, probably.
Right. You're a herd. You're a deer that is about to get taken down by some crazy lion pride.
And all of your quote-unquote morality is just based on the fear of a scared, trembling herd animal.
Right. But maybe underneath it all, you're actually a lion, too. Like you would say that. Like you have that, too, that killer instinct or whatever. And yeah, and that's what's so confusing. And it seems like it can go in circles. I had a professor one time. I got to a point with Nietzsche. I got so frustrated with him that I was like, so what would he propose the world to be like? Like, he never gives like a really clear answer of that. And the professor was like, yeah, he would probably want the world just to be full of a bunch of artists, kind of almost like, oh, not communism, because I think he would critique the hell out of communism, and he really predicted that, right? The whole idea of communism, but and how horrible it is. But he would like want this like free thinking, free flowing society where it's just like a bunch of artists like supporting each other, and he would want tranquility and peace to a certain degree, and avenues to get your aggressions out, and it would be like this weird world that to me, does it mirror nature? Does it mirror what we actually are? You know what I mean? But is that the point? It's really, to me, it was always confusing because there was no, a lot of times when you get a really good critique, at least giving Kant his day in the sun, is that he gave like a systematic way, like, no, this is what these morals are, and this is what they do, and this is the categorical imperative, and if you look at it under a microscope, is it good? Okay. If you look at it, worldwide, is it good? Okay. That's how you judge, how you do some new axiom in the world, and, carry yourself, and yada, yada, yada. And so he had a kind of a system to follow, and he wrote a lot, so that, you could read Kant for the rest of your life and you probably wouldn't read all the shit. Right. And so, but it's so technical and so hard to understand, and it's difficult, and it's really long sentences.
One thing I noticed from Nietzsche, he said something like, a philosophy is something that should be a call to action.
Yeah.
He would have criticized Kant or Socrates as being cerebral and not being visceral, of being objective and not being subjective. I actually kept thinking about Satanism when I was reading Nietzsche.
Yeah.
I don't know how much you know about, like, kind of real Church of Satan, modern Satanism.
Yeah. No, I know what I understand. I've actually met a bunch of sadists, right? And surprisingly, they're kind of good people, right? They really are all about like what they eat, how they carry themselves in the world. They're trying to serve the self.
Yes.
Beyond the self, kind of, right? And they're
really about embracing.
Yeah.
If you have violent tendencies, they shouldn't be diminished.
Right.
Or they shouldn't be
sexual perversion.
They shouldn't
like
be
let
repressed.
It go. Right.
They should be embraced.
Yeah. They should be integrated too. And maybe, that's maybe the best gift I think Nietzsche has contributed with his critiques of morals, is that this idea, JP talks about this because he's a big fan of Nietzsche too. And I think he understands him on a different
JP,
level.
Who's also like big sort of modern Christian.
Right. He's like
he's a huge, he's waving that Christian flag in some respects.
Right. He's not a Christian though. I don't think
he's not, but
he hasn't given into any of the camps yet.
Yeah, but he's been a huge, I don't know. He's been a way in for a lot of people who are disillusioned to the, value of Christianity.
Right, big time. Yeah. He's sensational.
Yeah. And of course, Nietzsche also, he would give, to use JP's language, the devil its due.
Right.
He would say that, we owe a lot to Christianity.
Right.
As a society, it has been founded on it.
The other thing that's funny is that I think also he was predictive, right? He was predicting that science was going to become the new religion, and the rails that science kind of come up on. I mean, they're religious in principle anyways, right? Like the whole scientific inquiry comes out of the religion, right? Of those times, of specifically Christianity and Judaism. And he would say that the science is just not going to do it. It's just, it doesn't have the moral codes that we need, right, as a society. And he's so, in a weird way, he's kind of predicted a lot of things that have happened, right? Because now you're seeing secularism in America rampant, right? And you're seeing these Christian churches and stuff really, perverting more towards the self and pride and all this stuff, right? And I'm not saying that's bad or good. I'm just saying that it's not traditional Christianity, right? It's not the nuclear family. It's not being promoted by the government. It's not, and they're trying to disincentivize family, right? And he kind of predicted that like 200 years ago. He kind of said, look, we killed God, right? We created God and we killed God. And now we don't have like a God basically, and so we're gonna make whatever's in front of us a God, and that weaves into recovery, right? Because we worship whatever's in front of us. We can't help it.
False idols,
false
dependencies,
right? And that's why you can't just discount him. You can't just go, oh yeah, he's just a sadist, or he's just an amoralist. No, he's trying to get in there and trying to, I don't know, he's trying to find lowercase truth out of untruth, or something, or the false truths that have been propagated since the ancient Greeks or something, and he's trying to really kind of twist them up and test them and see, do they work? Mm-hmm. Do they really work for people? Like, do they really work? Like, are these philosophers just self-serving? Mm-hmm. Are they just trying to get their penises sucked because truth is just a woman? Mm-hmm. And it's just a bunch of men philosophizing, trying to get laid, right?
And they're not.
And they're not getting laid. They're not getting laid. They're subjecting women. But he's so bad on, like, it's crazy. He's so, like, the end of this book, he just goes off on.
Yeah, he does. That's another, like,
wildest
deep
thing.
Reading of Nietzsche. You kind of go like, is this like also the final boss of incels here?
Yeah.
He's some guy who got burned real bad by some chick, and he's just letting it all come out sideways.
Or was his sister whipping him?
Yeah.
And he just Dude. Women didn't like that mustache because he had a stash that came out.
They might not have been into that.
Yeah. And he was too sick, and they were like, dude,
he didn't want to.
Maybe he had a little penis. Maybe he had a little penis.
Yeah.
I don't know, right? And so because the end of that book, it's just about women.
Yeah.
It's just going, oh, women that you think you can, get in the ring. Yeah, good luck. You're just as bad, right? Because you're just jumping into untruth as a condition for life too. And it's like, oh man, and like.
So speaking of his, like, the criticisms that, the ways he hasn't stood the test of time. So what was what's with the Nazis? Why were the Nazis all about him?
Well, one thing was, whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? That was a saying. And the idea of might is right, the blonde beast, like, these are all things that come out of Nietzsche's work.
What did Nietzsche think about equality?
He thought equality was trash.
Yeah.
From like a fundamental level.
He thought it was a suicidal, life-denying.
Yeah. Yep.
Sort of ideology.
Yeah, he would say that no matter what, you're not born equal. That's just not going to happen, right?
Yeah.
Like, people are going to have disabilities. They're going to have all sorts of, we're all different, right? Mm-hmm. And it's just not possible for equality or he would trash equality, not equality of outcome, but equal opportunity. He would say that that's garbage too.
Yeah. And
he trashes that.
Yeah, he does over and over again in this, in ways that some of the stuff that has become very.
What do you think? What do you think about that though? Like, because
let's say you think about it in terms of to use a more practical example. It's things like, if there's a test, there's a standard that's been set.
Right.
There might be certain people who statistically are disadvantaged by that test because they perform less well in the test.
Right.
Right. Which causes unfavorable outcomes. Right. So what you could do is you could get rid of the test.
Right. Which is happening.
Yeah. And ultimately what you end up doing is you end up punishing and disincentivizing the best among us. Mm-hmm. And the entire hive is going to suffer if the best among us are not properly incentivized to be just that. Right?
Right.
So how can you raise something up without also bringing something down?
Right. Yeah.
And that an effort to try to do that, to try to create that,
right,
is ultimately a self-harming strategy.
Life-denying strategy. Yeah. And he would also say, but he would say the idea of lifting somebody up, like, a quality of opportunity, which is kind of the model of America, right? Like, that's the way it's sold, right? That would be bad too, though. He would have a problem with
even that,
not just equity, but he would have a problem with like the way it's kind of set up now in America. My kid started walking at like 9 months, right? Some kids walk at like over a year and a half, right? Different kids adapt different, some have better social cues. Some some are raised in better families, some are raised in abusive families. Like it's, there's so much like
some are inevitably better, which means that some are worse.
Right.
And there is
and it's brutal. It's brutal.
It is brutal.
It is brutal. It's nature.
And we feel bad for those who are worse.
Right.
And that sense of pity and charity that we have for the things that are worse, he would see as
the weak animal that got hit by a car, the deer that's kind of limping along, and you're like, oh no.
You feel bad for it.
You feel bad for
it. You want to help
right?
it.
It was poor deer.
Yeah.
I mean, he would say that's probably a waste of time.
Yeah.
A total waste of time.
Yeah.
It almost goes back to, I feel so much like pagan impulse from him, right?
That's why I said the Satanist. For me, same idea is just this embracing of,
the self.
Yeah.
The strong self.
Yes.
The overcoming. Do you think it's advantageous, using his words, for a recovery person to read, that book, or Thus Spoke Zarathustra, or one of his, masterpieces?
9 times out of 10, no.
Right?
Yeah.
I think it depends on the person.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's good for me. That's why we're having this conversation.
Right. Yeah.
It changes things in a way.
It changes your perspective on just regular stuff.
But to the extent that a good life is founded on good principles, and a good principle isn't discovered until it's been road tested a little bit.
Right.
He's certainly going to help one road test.
Yeah. I mean, I got into a real big pit of despair when I was getting my degree, and I really focused on Nietzsche for, I purposely took Nietzsche classes because I was so like, provoked by him, and kind of, I loved him. It's like you love him because it's like, God, thank God somebody's saying some shit like this, they're just, like you want to hear kind of what we were talking about a couple episodes ago about like the bad boy, the rebel, the rapper, the punk rocker, fuck you to the man. Like he kind of is the ultimate fuck you to the man. Right. I mean, I'm honestly, right. But he's smart. He's precise. I mean, he's
funny.
It's almost like he is saying that he's an Ubermensch, but he's defining what an Ubermensch is, and he's defining himself.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what he's doing.
Yeah.
But I mean, it put me in a bad spot though, mentally. Like it really, because you think of like the stuff of like, love and doing the right thing or the good thing, right? And telling the truth and being honest and being humble.
I haven't thought about it. Come over here, I got a bite to eat before I came over here. And I was at the place, and there was this kind of kid behind the counter. I say kid, but he was probably 30. And he was sort of your prototypical, like, unkempt young man who probably still lives at home and hasn't had a girlfriend since middle school. And he came out and he offered me a straw, and I took the straw, and I felt a real sense of pity for him.
Yeah.
In a way that was sort of intoxicating. I felt just like compassion.
Yeah.
For this person who obviously was not the sharpest, like shiniest tool in the shed.
Right.
And I really liked that feeling, but so, there is something about, I don't know, about kumbaya. There is something about love, about feeling, comfort
and connection.
Yeah. And all of that stuff, which he
rails against
it. And I kind of internalize that, and I go, yeah, man, like that's not the most important thing there is. I've heard JP recently talk about it as like it's like a utopia for an infant. There's one where it's just about needs being met.
Right.
It's just about comfort being had.
Right. The baba, the binky, the blankie.
So much of that. And it certainly is, there's no short supply of it in recovery scenes.
Right.
A lot of what recovery is about drinking and drugging to an absurd excess.
Yeah, becoming the madman.
Because of discontent, because of not being soothed properly.
Right.
Right?
Trauma.
So we need to find healthier means of soothing. And some of those are taking delight in feeling connection, in, you know,
Yeah.
in being kind, of not thinking of yourself, of diminishing your selfish impulses,
Right.
of diminishing your 7 deadly sins, your lust, your anger.
Yeah. Your greed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of these qualities that many times throughout Beyond Good and Evil, you know, Nietzsche talks about as life-affirming qualities.
Right. It's almost like you need some of it, right? Like it's almost like the character defects that you have serve you.
Yes.
Right? They serve you to a certain point, and you can't completely, it's like we try to eradicate them in our communities, right? We try to just go, yeah, that greed and that lust is not serving you.
Yeah.
Your life is chaos. Like if you really embrace some aspects of his philosophy, you will end up on the street talking to yourself. A lot like what he was in a cabin talking to himself,
Yeah.
probably, right? I mean, I don't know, but I'm just assuming.
Mm-hmm.
And if you embrace that, you're effed,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we know that from firsthand experience. We were the madmen, daily drinking, daily drugging to absolute insanity and chaos. Nobody wanted us. We were not welcome in any home. And by just turning that just a little bit and getting that proper soothing and rightly aligning ourselves. Oh, I said we can cut that out. Rightly relating ourselves to a God of our own understanding, which maybe, I don't know what Nietzsche would think about a God of your own.
He might
understanding.
dig that.
He might dig that. See,
Yeah.
that's where Nietzsche
That
could
it's
be.
like it's no one else's God.
Right.
It's just your God, your own conception of God.
Right. Dang, that's Nietzschean.
Yeah.
I feel like that's more Nietzschean than anything.
Mm-hmm.
Because a program that gives you the opportunity to have a God of your own understanding. I mean, you know, you can make your God, you know,
It's your own values.
it's
right?
your own values. It's what serves you.
Mm-hmm.
It's what benefits you, right? It's how you get your money. It's how you have, you know, relationships. It's how you have sex. It's how you procreate. It's all that. It's your own way of life.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah.
There is a guide to it though, because you can't just say I just want to have cocaine and hookers, because that's what brought you down into insanity. But maybe you can have a little. I don't. Not cocaine though. That's it. That's an interesting. I mean, that's very. I mean, I'm wondering if we're off there, but
Yeah.
it sounds like that's a very.
And it's not
unique.
totally out of alignment in some respects. It's just like you see different lanes to go down when it comes to recovery.
Right.
And I think one is that, recovery is not easy. It's not for the meek or the mild. That it's a very hard thing to do.
Yes.
That it takes a lot of discipline.
Yes.
Takes a lot of fortitude.
Yes.
Takes a lot of commitment. And then it's not just coming into the warmth and getting a hot cup of cocoa and hanging out with your friends. You know, that it's a real trial of the will.
Right. And you're looking at yourself like in a mirror.
Yeah.
And you're looking at all the terrible things you've done and the terrible defects that you have, right? The selfish perversions that have propelled you in life.
Mm-hmm.
And where has that led you? You know what I mean?
A lot of those perversions are forms of self-deception.
Right. It's
Right.
illusions, right?
Which Nietzsche rails against. A lot of, sort of professed philosophies are really just sort of forms of self-deception.
Right.
So within recovery, to some extent, there's this culture of trying to look at and identify our own forms of self-deception.
Right.
And challenge them.
Right. And
within
walk through.
ourselves.
Yeah. And actually just get rid of them if you can.
Yeah.
You're right. Like if you can.
To the extent that we can become more real, stare the truth in the face, and not use recovery as like a baby blanket,
Yeah.
as these skillful means to kind of avoid some of the hard truths about life and to insulate ourselves in these ready-made beliefs. To some extent, one of the ideas that has kind of pushed me away from recovery and that I've pushed against, and it's been there, is this idea of a useful fiction. And it occurred to me, and the example that was most helpful for me to understand it was that of a porcupine. So I don't know if you know that porcupines are said to throw their quills.
Yeah, but they don't, right?
But they don't.
Yeah.
But if you believe that they do, you are less likely to get stung by a porcupine.
Right.
And if you spend time in recovery and you listen to it through that lens, it's not hard to hear a lot of what's being done and said as ways to collectively believe that porcupines throw their quills so that you're less likely to get stung.
Right.
Or to relapse.
Right.
Or to
like
bottom out.
Yeah, if you keep going to the barber shop, you're going to eventually get a haircut.
But there's these beliefs that aren't really in alignment with truth.
Right.
But if you do adopt them, you are more likely to be successful.
Right.
Right.
And then there's also the idea, where does that come from? That's the hive mind coming together.
And Nietzsche would support that, though, as far as like the herd.
Right.
There's a lot of morality that gets adopted.
Right.
But it's really a survival tactic for herd animals.
Right. That's the thing. You can just talk in circles with these things. But I think the idea of coming up with a power greater than yourself that's of your own understanding, that's an interesting inversion of any program I've ever heard of, right? Because it's always a God of the understanding of the church, or
that idea of a God of your understanding is one that part of me, has sometimes thought like, what is that?
It's bullshit.
It's bullshit, right?
Yeah.
That's just like, I can be what I want to be.
Yeah.
It's almost, you have to call me what I say.
Right.
It's got a little bit of that quality, right?
Right.
There's a lot of it is a resentment towards organized religion.
Right.
Like that the God that they wanted me to believe wasn't real. The God that they developed as a culture over thousands, if not millions of years, wasn't good enough.
Right.
But I got my own now, so they can go suck it.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. So it's a weird arm wrestle. Like, we're wrestling with this idea because, like, why does it work? Because, the funny thing is it gets honed down, because I think of my coming to believe in a God, right? My first one was this immature, I made it the marijuana plant, and then I was like, oh, it's the doorknob, and then it was the group of people, because I figured, okay, a God that's greater, that's higher than myself, that's more powerful than myself. If it's a group of people in a room and I try to fight them physically, they'll eventually get me, right? No matter what, no matter how good of a fighter I am, I'm going to get taken out. So that's a power greater than myself. And that's like the bar's so low that you can make it kind of that, but it's got to make sense. But then it gets honed down as you practice spiritual principles in your life. And it becomes a God of love and trust and loyalty and all these
these abstract virtues.
Yeah, these abstract virtues that he would rail against, probably.
Yeah.
But maybe if you come to him in that way, he wouldn't rail against them, right? Like if you're not looking at the world in a delusion of those, like you realize that the world still is dark and full of terrors and tragedies around every corner. It's almost like you got to balance both. You don't want to just be like the reformed hooker, or the Jesus thumping, or I don't know. I mean, maybe that's what he has the biggest problem with, is that idea where he sees it as delusional, right? People get so into their religion or their concepts of reality, and that becomes a truth, and it's not a truth. It's untruth, and he's just we'll read them more. I mean, but I don't know if it's a good thing for people in recovery to read. I mean, I'm not going to say.
I can tell you that I am eager to read more.
Yeah. So we're going to do another show. We should do Thus Spoke Zarathustra, because that's supposedly his best book. I've read it like 3 times, but
I was planning on Genealogy of Morality.
Genealogy of Morality is a good one too. Yeah, there's a lot of really good little essays in there and stuff.
Yeah.
But I think that's enough for tonight.
All right.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Well, I hope that made sense. And
until next time.
Good night.